When I first moved into Willow Creek, I expected calm predictability, manicured lawns, polite neighbors, children playing under streetlights. What I found instead was a kingdom ruled by a single woman, Karen Whitmore, president of the Homeowners Association. Karen wasn't simply an organizer, she was a sovereign cloaked in bylaws. Every crooked mailbox, every flower outside her approved pallet, every blade of grass grown too high, she saw it all. And if she saw it, she acted. 3 weeks after I arrived, the first notice appeared in my mailbox. Violation: lawn exceeds regulation height by 1.5 inches. Remedy within 72 hours. 1.5 inches. I laughed at first, thinking it a mistake. But when the second letter arrived, improper trash bin placement, visible from the street, I realized the message was clear. Karen had chosen me as her next project. The neighbors urged patience. "She's strict, but fair," they said, though their nervous glances betrayed the truth. They feared her. Some had surrendered years ago, trimming their hedges and painting their shutters to avoid her wrath. Others lived quietly, careful never to draw attention. I wasn't built for submission. The tension escalated when Karen marched up my driveway one September evening. Her tone was clipped, her gaze sharp as she jabbed a manicured finger at my flower bed. "Those roses aren't on the HOA's approved list. They clash with the neighborhood aesthetic. Remove them or fines will follow." I stared at her, stunned. "They're roses. What's wrong with roses?" "They disrupt uniformity," she said flatly. "Compliance ensures harmony." That word, compliance, stuck with me. Harmony, in her world, meant obedience. And obedience meant power. From then on, every meeting became a battlefield. Karen presided at the head of the table, gavel in hand, voice coated with false civility. I began raising questions others were too afraid to ask. When she announced a ban on Halloween decorations, I pushed back. "So, children can't even carve pumpkins?" "Correct," she replied smoothly. "Pumpkins rot. They attract pests." The room shifted uneasily. Parents frowned, kids whispered. I pressed harder. "This isn't a museum, it's a neighborhood. People should celebrate their traditions." Her eyes fixed on me, cold and unblinking. "If you don't like the rules, Mr. Dalton, perhaps Willow Creek isn't the right place for you." That line drew the boundary clear. It wasn't about pumpkins, roses, or grass height. It was about me defying her throne. The retaliation quickened. Notices appeared weekly. A cracked slab in my driveway, a bulb in my porch light not matching HOA standards, even a complaint that my dog barked too often. She was relentless. And yet, her obsession began to stir something in the community. Neighbors who once whispered behind closed doors now lingered after meetings, quietly praising me. "Good for you," they said, voices hushed. "She's been out of control for years." But their support came in shadows. No one dared speak publicly. They feared fines, retaliation, exclusion. Karen's reign thrived on that fear. Still, a shift was happening. With every confrontation, every pointed question, every refusal to bow, I was chipping away at her image of invincibility. For the first time in years, someone was saying no. And Karen noticed. The night before one particularly heated meeting, I found my garage door vandalized, the word "rulebreaker" scrawled across it in spray paint. The police shrugged. No cameras, no suspects. But deep down, I knew whose hand guided it. That was when I understood. This wasn't neighborly disagreement. It was a war. Karen wasn't defending community standards. She was defending her crown. And I had become the rebel threatening her kingdom. What I didn't know then was just how far she was willing to go. The roses, the pumpkins, the fines, those were skirmishes. The real battle hadn't yet begun. But as I stood there, staring at the graffiti on my garage under the pale glow of the street lamp, I could feel the storm building. And somewhere across the street, behind her curtains, I imagined Karen smiling. After that night, I stopped doubting the lengths Karen would go to maintain her grip. The graffiti wasn't random. It was a warning. And warnings from Karen were never idle. The violations increased with mechanical precision. Unapproved vehicle parked overnight. mailbox, paint not matching regulation shade. Improper storage of lawn equipment. Each letter was a jab, designed to wear me down. But instead of retreating, I turned each into ammunition. I kept meticulous records, snapped photos, filed appeals. I wasn't just defending myself, I was documenting her obsession. At the next HOA meeting, Karen attempted to tighten her hold. The board is considering legal action against repeat offenders who refuse compliance, she announced, her gaze fixed on me like a hawk over prey. I rose. Or perhaps the board should consider whether these violations are manufactured. Because I have evidence that suggests exactly that. A ripple moved through the room. For the first time, I saw doubt in the faces of my neighbors. People shifted uncomfortably, whispering. Some even nodded. Karen's smile thinned. Mr. Dalton, your hostility toward this community is tiresome. If you dislike the standards here, you're welcome to leave. But I wasn't leaving. And she knew it. The pressure campaign intensified beyond paperwork. One morning I discovered my trash cans overturned, their contents strewn across my lawn. Another night, a brick shattered the corner of my porch light. I reported these incidents, but with no proof, they dissolved into nothing. Then came the whisper campaign. Families I once greeted daily now crossed the street to avoid me. At meetings, parents pulled their children close, murmuring that I was unstable. Karen was painting me as a menace, her voice dripping with fabricated concern. But even as isolation set in, not everyone believed her. Mrs. Sanchez, my elderly neighbor, knocked on my door one evening. She kept her voice low, her eyes darting toward Karen's house. I shouldn't be saying this, but you need to be careful. At the last board gathering, Karen said she'd make sure you lost everything. Your house, your standing, your peace. She said you don't belong here. The words chilled me. Karen didn't just want me fined. She wanted me erased. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, replaying her threats, the vandalism, the lies. A line had been crossed. This wasn't a power struggle anymore. It was a campaign of destruction. So I prepared. I installed cameras across my property, hidden, discreet. I logged every encounter, every letter, every word whispered by neighbors too fearful to go public. If Karen was planning something, I would be ready. Still, dread seeped in. I began to notice details that gnawed at me. A faint chemical smell by my garbage bins. Karen's silhouette lingering too long near my yard under cover of night. Neighbors catching themselves mid-sentence when her name arose. And then came the meeting that turned unease into certainty. Karen sat at the head of the table, her posture sharp, her voice dripping with authority. Mr. Dalton has demonstrated repeated hostility. The board must consider legal removal of his residency. This is no longer about compliance, it is about safety. Gasps fluttered around the room. Some looked appalled, others confused. I stood, my folder of records clutched tightly. This isn't about safety, I said evenly. This is about control. And I can prove it. Every violation, every false claim, I have it documented. If you want me gone, take me to court. But when you do, the truth about how this HOA operates will come out. For a split second, her mask slipped. Anger flared in her eyes, raw and unguarded. Then, just as quickly, she hid it behind a tight smile. Be careful, Mr. Dalton, she said softly, almost sweetly. You don't know what you're up against. Her words lingered long after the meeting adjourned. They weren't a warning, they were a promise. And within weeks, that promise would ignite into reality, leaving me standing before the smoldering ruins of my home. But that night, walking back to my house under the street lamps, I knew one thing with certainty. Karen was no longer content with fines and whispers. She was preparing for something far worse. And I had just challenged her to a war she intended to finish. The night it happened was quiet, almost deceptively so. I remember sitting on the couch, my dog curled at my feet, thinking that maybe, just maybe, things had calmed. No new violation letters had arrived that week. No Karen lurking with her clipboard. For a fleeting moment, Willow Creek seemed at peace. Then came the smell. It was faint at first, sharp and chemical, like gasoline carried by the breeze. I frowned, rising from my seat. That was when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of crackling outside. When I opened the door, the world was already ablaze. Flames clawed up the side of my garage, racing toward the roof, turning wood into a furnace. Smoke billowed into the night sky, blotting out the stars. Heat blasted against my skin, forcing me backward as neighbors spilled out of their homes, some shouting, others frozen in shock. I grabbed my dog and bolted through the back door, stumbling into the yard as sirens wailed in the distance. The fire consumed everything in its path, moving faster than I believed possible. By the time the fire department arrived, my home was collapsing in on itself, the structure groaning before caving into a heap of glowing ash. I stood there in the cold night air, chest tight, heart hammering, watching the life I had built vanish in flames. And then I saw her. Across the street, standing among the gawking neighbors, was Karen. Arms folded, face calm, lips curved into the faintest smile. Not relief, not shock, satisfaction. Our eyes locked through the haze. In that instant I knew this wasn't an accident. It was the endgame she had promised. The fire marshal approached later, his expression grim. "Cause looks suspicious," he said. "We'll confirm, but it smells like accelerant. Someone set this." Arson. The word echoed in my mind like a hammer strike. I wanted to shout her name then and there, but I forced myself to stay silent. Without proof, my accusation would sound like paranoia. After all, hadn't she spent months painting me as unstable? If I named her without evidence, I'd only strengthen her story. So I swallowed my rage and waited. The days after were a blur. I slept on a friend's couch, met with police, filled out insurance paperwork. My neighbors offered awkward condolences, but most kept their distance. No one wanted to pick sides. Karen's shadow still loomed too large. But while I grieved, I also searched. 2 nights after the fire, I retrieved the memory cards from my security cameras, the ones I had hidden precisely because I feared something like this. Hands trembling, I loaded the footage. Hours of nothing. Then movement. A figure crept across my lawn just past midnight. A gas can glinted faintly under the streetlight. The person bent low near the garage, then straightened, glasses reflecting briefly as they turned toward the camera. It was her. Grainy, yes. Dark, yes. But undeniable. Karen Whitmore, carrying fire in her hands. I sat there, shaking, torn between fury and relief. Fury, because she had truly crossed the unthinkable line. Relief, because at last I had proof. I turned the footage over to the police. This time they took me seriously. Investigators ran tests. The same gasoline on my property matched what Karen kept in her shed. Forensics confirmed the footage hadn't been altered. The pieces were falling into place. And yet, fate played one last cruel trick. 1 week after the fire, I walked into the courthouse for a preliminary hearing with my insurance company. I half expected Karen to be mentioned, but not to appear. I thought she'd retreat, hide, deny until the walls closed in. But as I sat waiting, the courtroom doors opened. Karen walked in, dressed in a tailored blazer, hair pinned neatly, papers in hand. She looked every bit the respectable HOA president she pretended to be. Her eyes scanned the room until they found me. For a moment, the courthouse felt smaller, the air heavier. My burned home, my shattered life, and the woman responsible were colliding in this room, where her rules no longer applied. She smirked, as though daring me to speak. But she had no idea what I was holding. The footage, the evidence, the truth that would drag her from her throne. The fire had taken my house. Now it would take hers. The courthouse smelled of polish and dust, a strange mix of order and decay. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my palms flat against the cool wood, pulse hammering as if trying to burst free. Across from me, Karen Whitmore adjusted her blazer and stacked her papers neatly, every movement deliberate, precise, meant to project control. The same woman who had once strutted through the neighborhood with a clipboard now carried herself like a politician. Her eyes met mine briefly, cold, unyielding, and then shifted to the judge as though I were no longer worth her attention. The hearing began. Karen's attorney spoke first, framing her as a dedicated community leader who had suffered alongside the neighborhood in the wake of the fire. He painted me as careless, someone whose negligence had sparked the blaze. My stomach twisted as the words poured out, each one a calculated attempt to bury me beneath my own ashes. When Karen took the stand, she slipped into her performance flawlessly. Her voice trembled at all the right places, her eyes welled with practiced tears. She spoke of fear spreading through the community, of sleepless nights, of the tragedy of a neighbor losing everything. Not once did she acknowledge the smirk I saw that night, the gas can glinting in the dark. Not once did she falter. For a moment, I worried she might succeed, that her performance, wrapped in authority and false compassion, would outweigh the truth. But then it was my turn. I rose, leg stiff, throat tight. My attorney guided me with questions, each one steady, deliberate, leading me to the heart of the matter. I spoke of the relentless harassment, the endless fines, the threats veiled as policy. I described the night of the fire, the smell of accelerant, the rapid spread, the shadow across my lawn. And then we revealed the evidence. The courtroom hushed as the screen flickered to life. Grainy footage played, Karen crossing my yard in the dead of night, gas can in hand. Though the image was imperfect, the shape was unmistakable. Her glasses caught the light, her posture, her stride, all hers. Karen stiffened. The mask slipped. Her attorney objected, scrambled, tried to discredit the footage. But the fire marshal testified next, confirming accelerant had been used. Then the forensic expert took the stand, verifying the footage was genuine and that the gasoline matched samples from Karen's own property. The case unraveled before her eyes. Karen's composure faltered. Her lips tightened, her hands trembled as she shuffled papers. She avoided my gaze now, staring instead at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. And in that moment, the power she had clutched for years bled away. When the judge delivered the ruling, the words struck like thunder. Karen Whitmore, guilty of arson, reckless endangerment, and malicious destruction of property. The courtroom erupted in whispers, neighbors who had come to watch leaning into one another, their disbelief palpable. For years, they had feared her grip, obeyed her commands. Now they saw her stripped bare, a criminal cloaked in HOA authority. As officers approached to take her into custody, Karen finally looked at me. Gone was the smirk, gone was the certainty. In its place was something raw, desperate, a silent plea for mercy she had never once granted me. I held her gaze. I thought of the nights I spent dreading her letters, the humiliation she caused, the flames that devoured my home. And I gave her nothing, because she had taken everything. When they led her away, shackled and defeated, a weight lifted from my chest. The courthouse felt brighter, the air cleaner. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. Outside, the sky was wide and blue. Neighbors approached me, hesitant at first, then bolder. They apologized for their silence, offered support, spoke of rebuilding. For the first time in months, I felt the faint stirrings of community, not tyranny. My house was gone, yes. But something greater had been rebuilt. Dignity, truth, and freedom from the reign of an HOA tyrant. As I walked away from the courthouse steps, I realized Karen had been right about one thing all along. This was about control. Only now it was no longer hers. It was mine.